What would you do if one morning you woke up, walked to the edge of your field, and found strangers laying foundations for homes on land that had been in your family for generations? Would you shout? Would you fight? Or would you quietly set a trap so big, so clever, that the very people who tried to rob you would end up destroying themselves? This is the story of David Malcolm, a farmer, a fighter, and the last person anyone should have underestimated. David's land wasn't just soil and grass. It was legacy. His grandfather, a freedman after the Civil War, had worked odd jobs for years, saving every coin until he could finally purchase a wide stretch of green hills just outside a growing southern town. That land had been passed down through 3 generations, each adding something to it: an orchard, a well, a barn, and finally, David's modest farmhouse. To David, the land was his history, his children's future, and his identity. "This land doesn't just belong to me," he often told his neighbors. "I belong to it." But to the Homeowners Association, the land was something else entirely: profit. It began subtly, a knock on David's door. 3 men in sharp suits, 1 woman with a clipboard, all smiles. "Mr. Malcolm," said the tallest one, introducing himself as Mr. Wright. "Your property is in a prime location for development. Our community is expanding, and we'd like to make you an offer. Very generous." David shook his head before even hearing the number. "This land isn't for sale." They exchanged glances, the kind people share when they think they're dealing with a fool. "Sir," the woman said softly, "with the kind of money we're talking, you could move anywhere you want. Better house, better neighborhood." David leaned against his porch rail. "This is the better neighborhood. Been better since before you got here." That was the first meeting, and it should have been the last. But greed doesn't walk away so easily. Weeks later, trucks rolled into the empty lots that bordered David's farm. At first, it seemed normal. Construction crews poured cement, raised frames, hammered nails. Suburbs had been growing all around him for years. But then one morning, David noticed something strange. A line of stakes, bright orange flags fluttering, cut across the corner of his field. He frowned. Those weren't there yesterday. He called out to a surveyor in a hard hat. "Hey, you put those stakes on my property?" The man barely looked up from his clipboard. "Boundary markers. We're just following plans." "Plans?" David marched over, boots sinking in the soft earth. "Whose plans?" The man shrugged. "Talk to the HOA, I just measure." That night, David didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with old maps, deeds and papers spread out in front of him. His grandfather's name was on the first deed, ink faded but still clear. His father's name on the next, and his own signature on the last. The land was his. Legally, historically, spiritually, so high were strangers claiming it? The next week, David attended an HOA meeting. He was the only black man in the room, the only person in boots instead of polished shoes. The atmosphere was thick, like walking into a storm. At the front table sat Mr. Wright, smiling thinly. "Mr. Malcolm," Wright said, as though greeting an old friend, "we were hoping to see you here." "You're building on my land," David said flatly. The room quieted. A few heads turned. "Now let's not be dramatic," Wright chuckled. "According to county records, that parcel belongs to the HOA now. Perhaps you're mistaken." "Mistaken?" David dropped a worn leather folder on the table. "Here are deeds going back 3 generations. My land, my blood in this soil. You don't get to erase that with paperwork games." The room rustled with whispers. Wright leaned forward, his voice low. "Listen, Mr. Malcolm, we're trying to build a community here. 120. Homes, parks, schools, progress. You can either be part of it, or you can be left behind." David's jaw tightened. Progress? To him, progress didn't mean bulldozing history. "You put a single brick on my land," he said slowly, "and you'll regret it." Most men would have lawyered up immediately, screaming lawsuits. But David was different. His father had taught him patience. His grandfather had taught him strategy. Instead of fighting head-on, David quietly went to the county courthouse. He spent hours digging through property lines, zoning regulations, tax filings, and obscure rules no one had bothered to read in decades. And that's when he found it, an old clause buried deep in the land records. A clause so technical, so forgotten, that it was invisible to everyone except him. It stated that any development encroaching on his family's parcel without explicit, written permission would be deemed illegal occupation. And not just illegal, the law required the complete demolition of any structures built on disputed ground, with all costs borne by the encroaching party. David smiled for the first time in weeks. "They think I'm powerless," he muttered. "Let's see how powerless I really am." The houses went up quickly, rows of identical two-story homes with fresh paint, white fences and manicured lawns. The HOA bragged in newsletters about their new phase of development. They never once mentioned David, but David watched. He documented. He took photos of every stake driven into his soil, every wall that rose across his boundary line. Neighbors sometimes whispered, "Why isn't he doing anything?" Maybe he gave up. Maybe he took the money. But David stayed silent. The trap wasn't ready yet. It all came to a head at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The HOA hosted it with balloons, banners, and cameras. Families moved into the shiny new houses, kids playing on lawns that technically weren't even theirs. David showed up in his work clothes, boots muddy, leather folder under his arm, as Wright stood with scissors. Poised to cut the red ribbon, David stepped forward. "Before you cut that," David said loudly, "you should know. You've built 120 homes on my land." The crowd gasped. Reporters turned cameras. Wright's smile froze. "Mr. Malcolm, please," he stammered. "Not the time." "No," David said firmly. "This is exactly the time, and I've got proof." He held up the deed, the maps, the clause. Clear, undeniable. The whispers turned to shouts. Homeowners looked at each other in panic. Reporters scribbled furiously. For the first time, the HOA looked nervous. Very nervous. The ceremony collapsed into chaos. Homeowners clutched their children, whispering furiously. "Did he say our homes are on his land? Is this some kind of scam? Please tell me this isn't real." David didn't waver. He stood tall, holding the folder high. "These documents prove that not only is this land mine, but every brick, every nail you put here was built illegally, and by law you don't own a single inch of it." The cameras captured everything. Local news crews swarmed. HOA board members paled, exchanging frantic whispers. Wright, sweating through his perfect suit, finally barked, "This man is lying! Security, escort him out!" David didn't move. "You think you can silence me? Go ahead. Try. But every reporter here has already filmed me showing the deeds. And if that isn't enough," he pulled out one final paper. "Here's the clause you forgot to check. The one that says any structure built without my written consent must be demolished, at your expense." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. That night, panic gripped the community. Families who had sunk their life savings into these homes called the HOA nonstop. "You told us the titles were clean. Are we going to lose everything? You said the land was yours to sell." The HOA tried to calm them. "We're handling it." Don't listen to that man. But David's face was everywhere, on the evening news, across social media, even in the local paper with a headline that read, "Homeowners Association accused of building on stolen land." By the next morning, lawyers from every direction were circling like vultures. It didn't take long for the case to hit court. On one side sat David, calm, steady, with his folder of documents. On the other, the HOA board squirming in expensive suits. Behind them, rows of anxious homeowners filled the gallery, praying for a miracle. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, opened the file and raised her brow. "Mr. Malcolm, these deeds do appear authentic. Can you walk the court through them?" David nodded, standing slowly. His voice carried a quiet weight. "My grandfather bought this land after the Civil War. Worked as a laborer, saved every penny. My father tended it his whole life, and now I do. This land isn't just mine on paper, it's mine in blood." He held up the final page. "And here's the law, clear as day. Any construction done without my consent isn't just void, it's illegal. And the responsible party must demolish it, every single home." The courtroom buzzed with shock. The HOA's lawyer leapt up. "Your Honor, surely this is an outdated technicality. These homes represent families, schools, livelihoods." The judge cut him off. "Outdated or not, it is law. And law is what this court upholds." For the first time, David allowed himself the smallest smile. The ruling came swift and brutal. The HOA had violated property laws. Every structure encroaching on David's parcel was deemed unlawful. The HOA was ordered to cover all demolition costs, legal fees, and damages. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps as the verdict broke. Homeowners shouted in outrage. Not at David, but at the HOA. "You lied to us! You ruined our lives! We're suing you next!" Within weeks, the HOA board resigned in disgrace. Their bank accounts drained under lawsuits. Their reputation, once untouchable, crumbled into dust. And the homes? Bulldozers lined up like executioners. Families were forced to evacuate, watching in disbelief as shiny new houses were reduced to rubble. It was a sight no one forgot. 120 homes, collapsing back into the soil they should never have touched. But here's the twist. David didn't leave it at destruction. He stepped before the cameras, not with anger, but with conviction. "I didn't set this trap because I wanted to ruin families. I did it because no one, no HOA, no corporation, no greedy man in a suit should ever think they can steal history from those who bled for it. My grandfather earned this land. My father protected it, and I will defend it until my last breath." A pause. Then he added softer, "To those families who were misled, I'm sorry. I fought the HOA, not you. And if you need time to move, I'll give it. But this land stays in my family." The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in applause. People who once doubted him now saw him for what he was. Not a villain, not a victim, but a man who refused to be erased. Months later, the land stood quiet again. Grass grew where homes once stood. The only sounds were birds in the orchard and the wind through the trees. David rebuilt his fences, repainted his barn, and planted new crops. His children ran barefoot across the fields, laughing just like he once had. And whenever people drove by, they didn't see a vacant lot. They saw a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the smallest man in the room carries the biggest weapon of all, truth. David's story isn't just about one man's fight, it's about all of us. About the importance of protecting what's ours, standing firm when powerful people try to push us aside, and never underestimating the quiet strength of patience and justice. So the next time someone tells you that you're powerless, remember David Malcolm, the farmer who trapped an entire HOA with nothing but a dusty folder, a forgotten law, and the courage to say no. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Remind people that legacy matters. Truth matters, and land, like dignity, should never be stolen.